Hey guys, welcome back. Recently, Elite Force was extremely kind and sent over a licensed MP5K. You guys know I love MP5s. They are some of my favorite guns out there. So I'm super excited to check this out with you guys today. I got this and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a little black box in here and it says MP5K on it. I was excited. I still am. It's a really, really nice gun. I took it out to Nighthawk, shot a little bit, and chronoed it, of course. And it's a nice little gun. I really actually like it. I've got a few other MP5Ks, and this is probably the cleanest feeling out of all of them. Just right off the bat, it felt different and it felt really, really nice. So I do like it. So let's go ahead and sit this down on the table and open it up, and I'll show you everything it comes with, because it's actually really nicely packaged, and I do want to point that out. The Elite Force MP5K comes in a really small box, but it is extremely well packaged. A lot of foam in here. I have no worries about this during shipping, or if you want to use this later on after you get the gun for transportation to the field, it's definitely fit for that. I have no worries about it getting damaged whatsoever. You could probably even drop this in the box and it wouldn't have a problem. Comes with a warranty card. Basically, don't return it to the store you bought it from. Hit up Elite Force Umarex and they will service or repair the gun for you. A little BB advertisement card as well, because of course you want to have good BBs in your gun, and Elite Force has some pretty good ammo quality. And of course, the instruction manual. This is worth a read. If you're unfamiliar with the gun or are pretty new to airsoft, give this a read. Very picture oriented, very detailed, and a lot of good information for new players out there. Take the foam off, and we've got a 200 round high capacity magazine. I've got way too many of these. It's always nice to have an extra one, of course. Trap door on the top there, winding wheel on the bottom to wind the 200 rounds into the roughly 50 round reservoir that's in the front there. So works well and works well with the gun. The Elite Force MP5K, neat little gun, definitely hefty. Let's go ahead and check it out. Start from the back and move our way forward as always. The back doesn't come with a folding stock. This is the standard edition. They do have a limited edition that I think was a short run, if I'm not mistaken, and it came with the folding stock, which was a nice touch. But I also like having just the back cap on it. I've already got a couple other versions of MP5K, so this is a nice change of pace for sure. Has a little sling swivel on it, really simple, can hook on most kinds of slings to it. And this is actually where the battery compartment is, believe it or not. So you take the back two pins out, which is these guys, take the back cap off, and you need a stick type battery that actually goes up into the top of the gun, or the top of the upper receiver, or the charging tube here. I've got a little skinny 7.4 in there. You can fit a really skinny 11.1, but it's a pretty tight compartment. You either need like a regular NIM stick battery or a really special sized LiPo battery. I can probably link a few of those in the description, because I've got so many people asking me about that all the time. What size battery specifically fits in the MP5Ks? Because they're all really similar and they're all based on the original Marui design as far as the fitment in this compartment goes. What's going to happen after that is you take your handguard pin out on the front, take this whole thing off, and your connector is exposed up there. So if you got a LiPo or NIM, it really doesn't matter what kind of battery, you take that off and you can charge it from this point, and you don't have to take it out of the gun, because it is a bit of a pain to install in the gun. But once it's in there, you don't have to worry about it. It makes life a lot easier. The hop up is also located under the handguard here. You can slide it forward and back. One of the things I really, really liked about this particular MP5K was how tight that little lever is. Some other MP5Ks I've had from other companies were really loose, and you'd shoot them and the hop up would unadjust, and just slowly your BBs would start to drop because they weren't hopping anymore. This one is so tight, I don't think there's any way or any amount of shooting that would make it back off. It's very, very solid, and I have no worries about it de-adjusting the hop up during shooting or use. The selector, safe semi-full auto, pretty normal stuff. Above that, let's take a look at the sights, because the sights on this gun and any other MP5 are some of my favorite sights on any airsoft gun or any firearm for that matter. They are the diopter basket sights, and it does come with a metal rear sight instead of a plastic one, which is definitely a nice touch. So I can really quickly and easily line up these sights. They're very, very simple to line up, very fast target acquisition, and I do really like that. But if you're not an iron sights person, it does have claws on either side of the charging tube on top here for you to install a little optics mount. It does not come with one, but honestly, they're super inexpensive. You can get them for like $10 to $20 on the cheaper end, and they work just fine. I am going to end up using this as probably a sidearm or just some kind of indoor CQB gun every once in a while. So I probably won't have any kind of optic or dot sight or anything on here, but it does give you that option. What's really nice about most of the MP5s is you do have an ambi paddle release. So you don't have just one side where you have to hit the button. It does have that option on the right if you do have the most ridiculously long index finger in the world, you can hit that button. But generally, most people and myself just use the paddle. Really simple, really effective, and very convenient. The vertical grip on this gun, or the broom handle grip, depending on what you want to call it, is really comfortable. It's one of my favorite features of the MP5K, having this up here. And you get versions of this gun that have rails or this or that. No, vertical grip is the way to go. It's the most comfortable, it's the most iconic looking, and I do appreciate it. There is a front sling loop on here. It's actually part of the cotter pin that keeps the handguard in place. You can definitely attach a sling here, but there's a little piece of metal on the other side that essentially keeps the pin in. I'm not sure I'd trust it with tons and tons of strain, just like any other airsoft MP5K. So I'd probably stick with just using a single point sling on the back cap sling point. All the way up at the front, you do have the muzzle here. It is a threaded 14mm negative muzzle, so any 14mm negative suppressor will fit on here just fine. You also have the tri-lug mount, which is really, really cool. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of airsoft options for it anymore. So you may, if you do want to install a suppressor or a barrel extension of some kind, have to stick with the threads on here. But you do have both options in case you can find one of the tri-lug mount suppressors that does exist out there. All right, let's go to the tech table and open up the Elite Force MP5K. Information about the internals of the Elite Force MP5K I feel like are somewhat difficult to come by. I can Google pictures of the gearbox or internals, and I really don't find a whole lot. So thankfully, we've got this apart. The internals, the major stuff is going to consist of the motor, which is the long type, the hop-up and barrel, and of course, the gearbox, which I'll get to in a minute. The motor is a pretty standard long motor, average torque, really nothing super special. It's your pretty normal motor. It does have a D-type pinion for reference, and the shimming on it is actually really good. It really doesn't have really any upward motion at all. Some motors I've seen definitely could use a bit of a shim job, but this one is actually quite good. The barrel is rather short on this guy. It's listed as about 150 millimeters or so. It is brass. The crowning on it is pretty deep and rather well done. I do like seeing crowning on barrels. Just a little nitpicky thing of mine. The hop-up, your normal MP5K hop-up, the slider here is really stiff, which I really appreciate. I've seen some MP5Ks that are really rather loose, and they just like to, as you shoot, back off or turn off, and having one like this that is very stiff and will keep your adjustment is really, really nice. Something I noticed is that the install of the bucking there doesn't look terribly concentric, so I want to see if I can fix that a little bit. It's probably just a slight factory defect. After a few minutes of kind of messing around with the bucking, getting the fitment right, and a little bit of silicone lubricant, it looks much more consistent and should seal a bit better. Now for the part everyone wants to see, the gearbox. Version 3 is pretty similar to the original Marui design, really hasn't changed a whole lot. Something I will point out, the trigger does have a good bit of slack here. You can see until it actually hits the trigger shuttle, there's probably anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 inch of play there. And then it gets the trigger shuttle. So just be aware of that. I do wish someday they would make adjustable triggers for this. That'd be really, really nice, but just the design of this particular trigger being so long, no one seems to want to make one, unfortunately. So one of these days, but I can only hope. That's interesting. This gearbox is actually really, really tight together. Rather difficult to open up. Took a second of kind of messing around with it there to get it to budge. As always, I'm going to go ahead and take everything out. We can check everything out as kind of components here. And I'll retain the shimming so we can check that as well and see how good the shimming is on this guy. First things first, the spring and spring guide. The spring feels like it's kind of like an M, maybe 100, give or take. It's not the most powerful spring in the world. If you wanted a little bit more out of this gun, it does shoot rather soft. You could definitely pop a slightly heavier spring in there, like a 110, and probably up your speed a little bit there. Version 3 spring guide doesn't have bearings, but has a large washer on the bottom. It's kind of a nice middle ground between not having anything there and having bearings. It still gives you a little bit of rotation potential on the spring. Next up, the air compression system. Let's see what the compression's like. It's passable. It's kind of average for an airsoft gun, especially a stock one. The tappet plate, pretty flexible. I do like it actually. It works rather well. The nozzle, regular old polycarb, no nozzle, so pretty standard there. The piston is your pretty standard polycarb piston, no speed cuts in the rails. Second to last tooth is not removed, and it does have a ported piston head that just has basically a nut in the back to keep it on, so pretty basic. Cylinder's brass is ported really, really far up, not quite right in the middle, but it gives you just about the right amount of air volume for the short barrel. You could probably even do a little bit less if you wanted, but I do like that they kind of gave you maybe a hair more there. Cylinder head seals all right, pretty average, and the cylinder there, just one O-ring on this. Rubber damper, really a pretty standard setup for your air compression system. The bevel gear has a little bit of play. I could probably live with that depending on where the motor height is, but I'm probably going to shim that just a little bit more to kind of get rid of some of that play there. The spur gear actually has no play, which is rather nice. And then the sector gear here has a little bit of play. It's about the same amount as the bevel there. Again, I could probably live with that, but I'm still going to put a really small shim on there to tighten it down. Let's go ahead and check the height between the gears. The height between the bevel and the spur actually looks pretty good. I'm really happy with that, but I'm still going to shim the bevel up just a little bit there. Might be a little bit difficult to see there, but the spur and the sector gear need a little bit of refinement. The sector's a bit too high there, so I'm going to shim that down a hair and get their heights a little bit closer together. Overall, the stock shim job was pretty reasonable. It's definitely something I could live with an out-of-the-box gun without a problem. So the gears, they're your standard steel cut gears, pretty decent quality, nothing I can complain about at all. Slightly enlarged delayer there for the sector, and your bushings are 7mm. Now, these are the cross-cut bushings. In theory, they're supposed to have a little bit of a lubricant in the little crosses there to keep your gears lubricated. These are fine. Running on a gun that's shooting this soft, I'm not going to worry about those at all. So your setup here is pretty solid for a gun that's really meant for CQB and indoors. Something I didn't mention earlier, because I honestly didn't come to mind, I've been using Airsoft MP5Ks for 10 plus years, and I'm kind of just used to it at this point. The charging handle does move, but it has no function. It's just really for show. I wouldn't recommend slapping it, and honestly, when there's a battery in here, you essentially can't, because your wiring and such will go right behind it, and it doesn't even move back maybe a half an inch with all that back there. So it's cool, it's there, but it really doesn't do anything. So just a heads up. Being an MP5K, of course I'm gonna give this a really good grade. I really like it. It's very solid. I like the feel and finish. It feels good. There's no other way to say it. It's just a solid put together gun. It performs about as you expect. The range is honestly average. If I'm hitting 120 feet with it, that's doing just fine. It's a short barrel gun that's shooting pretty soft, and it's really a very, very stock, basic airsoft gun. There's not a whole lot of bells and whistles to it. It is what it is, and it works well. I'm going to end up using this as a sidearm, and I think it's going to work very, very well for that purpose. Great for indoor, CQB, clearing buildings and such. Works just great, and that is really its role, I feel like, in airsoft. Definitely, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. It could use a little bit of tuning internally, but nothing too excessive. I feel very comfortable using this stock out on the field without ever opening it up or tuning or anything. I think the tuning was actually pretty reasonable in it. So, for that reason, 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Prodigy from Airsoft Team Kilo 23. This is the Elite Force MP5K. I do recommend it because it is the only metal MP5K on the market right now. They rock, it's a nice little gun, and it's got all the upgrade potential of any other airsoft gun. So if you wanted, you could make this thing an absolute crazy, insane 75 RPS dual sector airsoft gun. Or you could be like me and run a 290 FPS, 15 rounds a second little sidearm AEG, which is more than enough, I think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.